So, yeah, over the last 3 years, I have done individual reviews of these two talking cube clocks, but I've never really compared them. And boy, is it going to be a comparison. It's actually quite interesting. The design has come such a long way in recent years. So, check this out.
It's 23:22.
It's 11:29 p.m.
This is the back of this one, the one on the right.
It's 23:22.
And then this, where the speaker is on this one, is actually the front.
It's 11:29 p.m.
No, actually, no, I'm sorry, this is the top. So, you'd actually have it resting more like this. Okay? So, you've already seen the sides. This is the bottom of this one and the back of this one. Here's the top. Now, here's something interesting. You probably noticed that on this one, the button, the only exposed button is this big round one up here.
It's 11:30 p.m.
That gets the time, right? Whereas with this one, all the controls are exposed. So where are the controls on this one? Well, they're actually behind the battery door. And I want you to take a look at the controls here for a moment. Let's do something simple like setting the alarm. So to do that on this one, on the one on the right, actually takes a bit of gymnastics and the ability to hold in a button for an extended period. And also, look at the size of the buttons. The one here on the left is significantly bigger. So what you do to set the alarm is you hold in this. There are two alarm buttons. One of them says set and the other says on off. So we hold in the alarm set button.
Alarm, it's 0 o'clock.
Okay, so we go ahead and set the hour.
Hour setting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Alarm, it's 11 o'clock.
So if you want to switch the alarm on, you have to go in from the far right to another little button.
Alarm on, it's 11 o'clock.
Okay, so how do you do the same thing on this one? Well, with this one, it's actually a lot easier. Why? Because instead of 5 buttons, and tiny buttons at that, you only have 2. You'll also notice controls here for announce on and off. Let's set the alarm first and then I'll explain that. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take a look here at the controls. You have 2 of them. A square button, which is mode, and that cycles through the setting modes. Think of it as scrolling through items in an option menu on a computer. Set. That's where you make your selection, or in the computer analogy, you click on your selection, okay? That's it. Those are the only 2 buttons you have to worry about when setting the thing. So, let's see. What time do we set the alarm for on this one?
Alarm, it's 11 o'clock.
So we're going to go ahead and set the alarm. Same thing.
Announce on. Alarm off. Alarm hour 10. Hour 11. Alarm minute 30. Minute 31. Minute 32. Minute 33. Minute 34. Minute 35. Minute 36. Minute 37. Minute 38. Minute 40. Minute 45. Minute 50. Minute 55. Minute 0. Alarm AM. Alarm alarm AM, alarm.
So we got the sound where we want it. And to exit the menu,
It's 11:33 p.m.
now I don't know about you, but to me this way of doing things is considerably easier. Now I noticed, I told you a second ago that we have an announce function on this clock. On both of these actually. So on the old one, you first of all have to find the rectangular LCD display. To the right of that is a little switch. You move the switch down, and the announcement is off. You move the switch up, and the announcement is on. So what do you do to get the same effect here? You go back into the menu by pressing Mode,
Announce on,
and then you push Set,
announce off, announce on, announce off, announce on.
and then to get out of the menu, you hit the top time tell button.
It's 11:34 p.m.
There's a volume control to the left of the LCD display on this one. On this, on the older one, on the newer one, it's just a rotating dial. You rotate it to the right to turn the volume up, left to turn the volume down. Both of these cubes run on AA's. This one runs on 2 AA's, this one runs on 4. And I think the reason it runs on 4 is because it's got a much more powerful speaker. Have you noticed something missing on the newer one? A display. If you have, if you're like me and you have issue reading small screens, why even have a screen at all? Now on a watch I can understand it, because with a watch you're going out and people will glance over at your watch and want to get the time, or they'll, if you're a watch aficionado, you may notice the dial and it may, you know, it's a piece of jewelry for a lot of people. Whereas with a clock, it pretty much sits on your bedside table all the time. So why would you want, you know, if you can't really see the display, why would you want one? And even for those, like I have some usable vision, and these controls are high enough contrast to where I don't have to get my nose up to the device to actually set it. The other reason I'm able to do that is because of the lack of controls. Like in order to set the time, it's similar to the alarm. On the old one, what you have to do is you have to press and hold the hour or minute button. With the alarm, you have to do the same thing while holding the alarm down. Whereas with this one, the new one, the one from RNIB, you just have to go through the menus.
Announce on, alarm off, alarm hour 11, alarm minute 0, alarm AM, alarm clock hour 11, clock minute 37, clock PM. It's 11:37 p.m.
And that's it. And from a design standpoint, I would say this one is the better design. The one here on the left. Why? Because it's specifically designed with the blind in mind. Whereas over here in the States, when they were designing their clocks, I'm not saying that the blind couldn't use it, but it's more of a learning curve if you ask me. And in the States, a lot of the times, people will buy these and think that they're neat novelties, and some people don't even realize they were designed for the blind. I'm not sure if that happens across the pond. If it does, I'd be happy. I'm very interested to know whether or not that happens. The other really cool thing about this one that I think is a really handy design feature is the fact that the battery door covers the control mechanism, so that once everything is set, the only button you have exposed is the time tell button.
It's 11:38 p.m.
and you don't have to worry about touching anything. This one, you get pretty much the same effect by pressing it, by placing it with the screen down, which, as I said, is the bottom of this one. But to me, it doesn't make sense to have such tiny controls, whereas when the same functions can be accomplished with simply 2 buttons. I mean, it's interesting. Now, if you want these, this one is still in production, but I don't know how much longer that's going to be the case. I've had this one for 3 years, and I think the Royal National Institute for Blind People might be discontinuing it. I don't know that for certain. Here in the States, you can order it through MaxiAids or through the Braille Book Superstore, which is a Canadian dealer. Oh, one other thing. If anybody tells you that this is available in different colors, it's not. It's only available in the gray and the yellow if you're going to order stateside. If you're going to order abroad, then yeah, you've got more color choice to choose from. I think they recently came out with a blue version with silver controls. This one was handed down to me by my late grandfather back in the mid-90s. It is 20 years old. I've had this for over 20 years. It's got sentimental value. It reminds me of both my late grandfather and of my elementary school days, because my elementary school teacher had one very similar to this. But if you're going to look for if you want to get a cube, I would honestly go with this one. With one very big caveat. The caveat is the newer cube, and I'm not the only one to complain about this. I think it's a design flaw it's a design flaw in the fact that they use a very cheap quartz crystal. This is a standard quartz clock. It's not radio controlled. There is a radio controlled clock in the UK that has a very similar control mechanism to this. The only problem is the radio controlled frequency won't work outside of the UK. And I say problem because I live stateside. Anyway, I mentioned that this used a very cheap quartz crystal. What is the side effect of that? It loses time like nobody's business. It's not uncommon for this thing to be a few minutes behind after about 2 weeks. So, if you want this, be sure it's not going to be your primary clock. And be sure that you don't mind resetting it every now and then. What I will often do is, if I need to set an alarm on this thing, and say it's 13 minutes slow, well, I will set the alarm to go off, say if I have to be up at 5 a.m., I will actually set the alarm for 4:43, so that it does go off at 5 a.m. With the other clocks. It's just simple math. And usually what I'll do is when I need to reset it, I'll just wait for it to be an hour behind and then just move it up an hour. The other interesting thing is, the clock starts its timekeeping at 8 o'clock in the morning, not midnight like most clocks. So if you can live with those shortcomings, the 8 o'clock in the morning is not a shortcoming. I think the main shortcoming is the fact that it loses time. I would highly recommend this model, unless you're a vintage collector. In that case, you could go with this one, but these are actually much harder to find. Plus, like I told you before, I think the design on this one, on the newer one, is much easier to work with. It just makes more sense. What do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.